Hello and welcome to a supplementary episode of the MTG Arena Run. I'm making this because after I watched myself do the first episode, I realized I did a very bad job of explaining how the deck worked. I also realized that if I were to explain the deck a bit thoroughly, it will eat into the time, and I was already cutting into 1 hour as it is, so I figured I would make separate episodes for each of the decks. Right now, I consider this to be a pre-mortem of the Azorius Ascension deck, as originally designed by Wizards. And after I finish the quick constructed run, I'm going to make a post-mortem and make several suggestions on how to change the deck out. So anyway, the idea of this is it's a control deck whose final game plan is to take advantage of Ascend. Right now we're looking at one of the cards one of the key components that has Ascend, Arch of Orazca. And the idea here is that it wants to play a long game. It wants to try to get as many permanents on the board over time, at least 10, and at least get the City's Blessing. Once it has the City's Blessing, the design is that it wants to be able to accrue card advantage over time. Here we see Arch of Orazca. Over time, it will net you additional cards. We have Kumena's Awakening. It will also net you additional cards. You could play it earlier, but you're also kind of giving the opponent additional cards if you cast this without the City's Blessing. So the idea of this deck is that it wants to be able to win based off overall advantage. So let's take a look at some of the early stuff here. As you can see that the deck is mostly instants and it has a handful of creatures but not much. Most decks typically would want to have at least 15, 18 creatures. Standard tempo deck. This one, it has very few creatures, but it has many ways of retaking that advantage. So let's take a look at the instance first. We have typical counter spells like 2 copies of Cancel, 2 copies of Essence Scatter. We have a single Negate. We have a single copy of Censor. Based on the few games I've had experienced, it looks like people are very good at avoiding walking into a Censor. So I'm not too sure how great this is now. But the nice thing is that at least you can cycle it if your opponent's quite smart enough. We also have a big copy of Spell Swindle. This is also another way of getting enough permanents to hit Ascend quickly. Feels kind of expensive for a counter spell at 5 mana. It's probably a lot better if we're playing a 3-color deck. I've seen this put to good effect on decks like Grixis. That's blue, black, and red decks for those who don't know what it is. And we also have a single copy of Supreme Will. A bit expensive, though. Actually, if you think of it, it is cheaper. It is cheaper than Cancel color-wise, and might be a better fit. It's not often that your opponent would have tons of mana. So I guess those are some of the early changes we could make. But we'll see. Maybe straight up cancel might be better. You definitely want Essence Scatters because those are the spells you typically don't want your opponent casting. We have a singleton copy of Expel from Orazca. Being able to... this is one of our temporary forms of removal, though it is actually better if we do have Ascend. We actually have a sideboard card in the main deck, but only because with the way Magic the Gathering Arena is now, there is no such thing as a sideboard. All games are simply one and dones. So it's actually nice to have one copy of Forsake the Worldly. We have some card draw in Hieroglyphic Illumination. Again, we can chip this in early with cycling. Actually, looking over the deck, you kind of want to have take advantage of the cycling, because it's not guaranteed that you'll always have the mana out to cast this on main. So being able to exchange this for another card if you really need to dig is quite nice. There's also another draw. we also have 2 copies of Opt. Another good way to filter through your cards. So, and quite a standard removal, quite a standard counter spell package. I really appreciate having a good number of counter spells, but it does mean you are leaving up mana open a lot of the time. You want to be able to balance it with spells that you are not completely reacting to your opponent. So having a mix of spells, having a mix of cycling cards and instant card draw spells. Actually, I'll be probably looking into other effects that can be cast at instant speed. The spell from Orozco could easily be replaced by a new card from Dominaria, called Blink of an Eye. I'll probably show that later on the post-mortem when I make that. Anyway, we also have a few more powerful sorceries. Secrets of the Golden City, it's pretty much there for the Ascend. Being able to draw 3 cards later in the game is quite nice. Yes, a singleton copy of River's Rebuke. It's actually done quite some good work. Again, there are many. Some of these spells can be replaceable. I'll probably go over some of the possibilities on the post-mortem. And we have our creature package. Several of the creatures here take advantage of the embalm mechanic from Amonkhet. So right here we see a base list of 10 creatures, but in fact, when some of these die, we have also Eternalize from Hour of Devastation. We actually have virtually 15 creatures. So some of these are nice to be able to trade off. Angel of Sanctions is a one big payoff and good decent removal spell. Glyph Keeper, also a decent finisher. I think this is actually much better because it protects itself. Labyrinth Guardian, this is the one early card that I'm actually quite impressed with. The weakness is not so much a weakness. It's not often your opponent is going to. It's still going to eat a card from your opponent. And better having your opponent try casting their cards to get rid of this rather than having them be able to cast it on some of your better stuff. Let's see. Then Sunscorch Champion, very good way to recoup some life. No real way to take advantage of the discard the card from Eternalize, but we are drawing a lot of cards. Vizier of Many Faces is a good way to take advantage, especially if our opponent has better creatures than we do. Then we have 2 copies of Snubhorn Sentry. Again, this is another creature, early creature, just acts as a wall. Can go in and beat face when you hit Ascend. I've managed to cast both of these in one earlier game with Ascend, so a pair of 3 trees for 1 mana each. Quite decent, but this is probably one of the creatures that's easier to go. You don't really need to have so much Ascend, but what you want more is quality Ascend, not quantity Ascend. So I would much rather have my Ascend on Arch of Orazca or Kumena's Awakening. Secrets of the Golden City is not so much. I would like it in Expel from Orazca. I'm also quite happy with it in Resplendent Griffin. This is one of the Ascend payoff cards. You can play it early, simple 2/2 flyer for 3 mana. Later in the game, it will buff itself over time. Slippery Scoundrel is also another Ascend finisher that's quite decent. Sure, it's gonna eat a lot of removal, but again, this is one of the creatures that you would rather have eat removal than your Angel of Sanctions or your Labyrinth Guardian, or not Labyrinth Guardian, your Glyph Keeper. We also have, speaking of removal, we have a nice enchantment package. Actually, this is most of our removal. We have several decent choices. Our cheap ones are Baffling and compulsory rest. So Desert's Hold, we actually can't take advantage of its +3 life because of the land base as it is. Nice for wizards to sneak in a little hint about how to upgrade the deck. But I'm actually thinking of upgrading the deck by removing the Desert's Hold altogether. Basically, with the removal, you either want to have the really good ones that cost 4 mana or the really cheap ones that are still decent at 2 mana. 3 mana is kind of in between there. Speaking of the 4 mana removal spells, Cast Out is quite good because you can cast it at instant speed. You can also cycle it and you can also cycle as a bonus. Excellence Binding, actually based on how the gameplay is right now, having a balanced number of cast outs and excellence bindings is the way to go. If ever we have a sideboard, you probably might want to start with more cast outs and fewer bindings. Then you could swap them out based on who your opponent is. Right now it's just some one and done matches, so probably want to have an even number of each. The Pious Interdiction kind of does the same thing. It gains you a little bit of life, but the permanent is still there. So I might actually prefer swapping it out for another cast out. Also interesting to note that because a lot of this is enchantment removal, it is usually going to be permanent, but don't take it too much for granted. If you watched my earlier video on the second game, I was holding on to a Pious Interdiction for a long time. I really couldn't cast it because my opponent could easily just sacrifice sacrifice another creature I had an enchantment on, because it has the ability to remove an enchantment. Yeah, I had compulsory rest on it. I needed to put it there to cancel out beats. It was a bit of a complicated process in order to free it up. It involved this card, Edifice of Authority. Now that I think of it, I'm surprised he didn't remove this one. And anyway, so this is a nice artifact to have as a one-off. Nowadays, it can be obsoleted with another much better artifact. Again, we'll go over that in the post-mortem. But having a single copy of this is actually quite nice. Sometimes you need to buy more time, and this artifact does it. Simple quick investment, little extra investment and little payments over time. Eliminates your opponent's best attacker for the most part, and eventually you can get it to do great stuff, open the way for your attacks in the later game. So as we can see, the idea of this deck is try to take advantage of Ascend, but last until you can get there. It's not super hard. The deck has the means to hold off enough early game aggression. I'm actually especially looking at Labyrinth Guardian. One temptation of typical control deck is to depend solely on instants like your Essence Scatters and your Sensors to keep the early game clean. But being able to have creatures that can gum up the board very early and give you some extra advantage over time, that is probably another way to go. So I guess it's easy. So I guess it's easy to figure out which creatures to swap out, but we'll see. We still have a few more games down on the belt. The land base is actually another one that is quite interesting. We have a good number of basics. Meandering Rivers, Akasar dual lands here. There are more expensive options that will do a lot better than this. That's probably the first thing I would definitely upgrade. We have a singleton copy of Field of Ruin to remove troublesome lands. Right now in the current standard format, we have the very good non-basic lands that are the other side of double face cards. Let's see if I can show you an example from one of the other decks. Okay. Probably definitely don't have it here in the early. Oh wait, we do here. So we have here's an example. Hadana's Climb. When this flips over and the other side becomes a very decent, actually quite very decent, very powerful non-basic land. So being able to have the option to remove those lands is quite nice right now. So I probably will keep this singleton. I definitely will keep one copy of Arch. If I can get a second, I would definitely put another one there. Basically, any way I can get advantage over time. That's pretty much the gameplay of Azorius Ascension. And that's basically the pre-mortem of this deck. So we'll probably look over this deck again once we hit our post-mortem series. But for now, we're gonna head over and play a few more games. This is it for our supplementary episode of the Magic Arena Run. Oh, there's another thing I forgot. If you like what I produce, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Like the video, subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you again next time.